Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguised Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network and the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, two underscores, A-N-T. Give me a follow on the old Twitter if you are inclined to do so. Find me on TikTok under the exact same handle, pro2_ant. That's pro2_ANT. Post a lot of film clips and cut ups and chicanery and tomfoolery on the TikTok as well as the Twitter. In tonight's episode of Disguised Coverage, we are in the midst of Buffalo Bills training camp. We talked about it last week on the show, where last Wednesday's episode of Disguised Coverage was the last episode of the year that was going to be without actual meaningful football being played. Granted, not regular season stuff, but what's up, John? Nice to see you. Welcome. But the last episode, last week, Wednesday, was before we weren't having practices. We weren't having actual footage and things to talk about. We weren't getting actual meaningful reps and competition and all of these things. We are in the midst of that here in week one of Bills training camp, and it's been exciting. And there's been a lot of information that has been coming out. Awesome, Jason. The tree is having a fantastic training camp. I'm going to do some film breakdowns of it later because the performance has just been absolutely next level. But there's been a lot of information coming out of Bills camp so far. Myself and a lot of the Cover One team were in attendance to start week one of training camp, and so we have a lot of firsthand accounts and experience in addition to what we kind of surmised and thought coming into camp. And, no matter how you slice it and however you want to break it down, we are in the midst of the 2022 regular season coming up soon, but the 2022 season has started. Once training camp hits, that's like the official, waving the flag, the race started, it's begun. We're only a couple weeks away from preseason. We are less than a month away from the start of the regular season. There's a lot to go through and dissect. And in tonight's episode of Disguised Coverage, within that, notion, as Roman says here, he's loving the Khalil Shakir hype. Shakir has been fantastic. We're going to talk about him on tonight's episode. And, tonight's episode, as mentioned in the episode description and in the title here of this episode, we're going to focus on anything and everything training camp for the most part. If you guys have anything you want to throw into the chat, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, feel free. We will address it here on the show. But what we're going to focus on in tonight's episode are the personnel packages and groupings, the multiple alignments we've seen this far in camp. What do they mean, not just for training camp and for this week, but what do they mean going forward? Do they give us a peek into the mind of Ken Dorsey, someone who's trying to put his stamp on this offense with his first year as, offensive coordinator, being promoted from the quarterback's coach? So we're going to dive into what we've seen so far, again, in terms of packages, groupings, alignments, how players are being lined up, where they're being lined up, how they're being used, what scenarios situationally. We're going to talk about all that just for your own knowledge in terms of, again, what's been happening so far in camp, but again, what it means and how it projects to the NFL regular season. And then we're also going to dive into several of the rookies, because the rookies have been flashing in a lot of ways, both positively and some for some negative aspects as well. So we're going to do a rookie status or progress report update in terms of performance, execution, and where several of the rookies stand right now on this team and what it means for their progress going forward. There's a lot of football, no matter what, is such an interconnected game, and we're going to dive into what these performances from these rookies mean so far, combined with some of the performances of other players in their position grouping, other players on their side of the ball. Talk about that interconnectedness. I don't know if that's a word, but if it is, awesome. If it's not, who cares? We're going to talk about all that in tonight's episode. But as I mentioned earlier, anything that you guys got and girls got, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, philosophies, ideologies, maxims, whatever have you, at any point in the show, throw it up into the chat. I try to get to anything and everything I possibly can here on the show. And you guys know, anything that is a super chat automatically gets pulled up, not just because I respect the monetary donation, but also because I see the pop of color flash in between, as my split screen here with my notes and the video stream here. So I see that pop of color, gets me a little more engaged, and I bring that chat right away. So anything you got, super chats, regular thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, whatever have you, let's get it popping here in the chat in tonight's episode. And I'm going to grab a couple of comments so far. Ooh, Pops Mafia talking about one. Yeah, some fireworks between Stephon Diggs and Kaiir Elam today. So this episode is live Wednesday, July 27th. But if you're listening later, that, when you hear like, oh, today, what day was that? It was Wednesday. Yeah, there was some chippiness between Kaiir Elam and Stephon Diggs. And we know Stephon Diggs, and I mean this in a positive way, he's not afraid to, yuck it up and chop it up with anybody, physically, verbally. He is very confident, and he's a chippy kind of dude. He's got that dog in him. And Kaiir Elam appears to have a bit of the same. And I think also a lot of that tends to be when you're constantly going up against those guys. You see it in hockey and basketball series all the time, like especially in hockey where usually have certain lines matched up against other lines. And usually by like game 2 or game 3, guys are just so frustrated because you're up against the same guy and that guy's always in your face. He's always leaning on you. He's always hitting you. Like he's always just kind of that antagonist that's up against you. And we've seen thus far in training camp, Kaiir Elam has been matched up with Stephon Diggs a lot. I noticed that right off the bat on Sunday in red zone work and in team. Stephon Diggs, anytime he, lined up, especially in red zone, Kaiir Elam was lined up, man up on him. And Diggs got the better of him Sunday and Monday and Tuesday. And, we're going to talk about Kaiir Elam a bit in this episode, but I think it's, the fireworks today are a combination of Elam being fiery, Diggs being that chippy guy and always having an edge, but also probably, maybe a little bit, again, this is just an assumption on my point, maybe a little bit of some emotion boiling over for Kaiir Elam because he's had a bit of a rocky start to this training camp. And, he made some plays at 8, came down with an interception. We don't know the full context of it, but it's nice to see him, not backing down from, Stephon Diggs is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL and one of the best players on this team. So to see Kaiir Elam, not back down and be willing, go toe to toe against him, physically and on the field, but also verbally and kind of mixing it up. Very interesting. Very interesting. Great point here from Jason. Pads come on soon, and then we'll be able to make true observations of what's going on with who. Excellent point. I think every single practice is valuable. I think every walkthrough, run through, whether you're working against air, whether you're working against other players, even if it's just shorts and shirts and shells and helmets, whatever have you. I think every single rep and practice is valuable. But we know, especially for certain groups like the offensive line and the defensive line, like you really want to see what they look like when the pads come on. AJ Epinesa is a great example. He's been having a very good training camp this year, much like he did last year. The burst off the edge, the hand technique, the way he's able to consistently generate pressure in team and in drills over and over again. But you always want to see like, okay, will that translate when the pads come on? It's a different game. It's a different nature of the beast. You see it all the time. Leslie Frazier talked about it in his presser yesterday that, as a player, they would see it all the time where, and he's seen it as a coach too, but you'd see those guys who in shorts and shirts are just amazing. And everybody's like, wow, like, look at that guy. He's going to be great. And then they put the pads come on and guys disappear. So once the pads come on and the pads start popping, yes, we will find out more about a lot of these individuals, especially for the rookies too, because we've never seen them really with pads popping in the NFL. So very excited. Comment here from Pops. The passing game was fun to watch today. Apparently Josh Allen turned it on and, remedied some of the struggles that the offense has had these last couple of days, which we're going to talk about. Eric with just a very simple go Bills. Go Bills, Eric. That's the rule. I think everybody knows that. If you're a Bills fan, you say go Bills to another Bills fan. They have to reciprocate with a go Bills. That's fair. When do they put the pads on? Friday? Saturday? End of this week. I don't remember the exact date, but end of this week, pads start popping a little bit, I believe. Keys with a go Bills, go Bills. Everybody's just so nice. Appreciate you, Mark. So the D-line good or the O-line bad or somewhere in between. Put my mind at rest. I think without pads, it's huge advantage defensive line. You don't have you're lighter, you can move freer. It's easy to be fluid when you have no pads. There's less surface area for the offensive lineman to grab onto and grip. Like I just think padless is advantage defense all day. But the defensive line did look good in what I saw. I was especially being there live. In addition to seeing video and things after from the days that I wasn't there, but being there at the early part of this week. Von Miller is as advertised. Tim Settle looked good. Ed Oliver looked good. Again, like I mentioned, AJ Epinesa looked good. I think the D-line and the defense as a whole, usually at this point in training camp anyway, defenses are usually ahead of the offense, let alone when an offense has, I put this on Twitter yesterday, this offense has a brand new first-time offensive coordinator. This offense has a brand new quarterbacks coach. This offense has a brand new offensive line coach. I think it's very fair to expect some kind of, stumbling on the path as we start training camp here, because all these coaches and players and units and groupings are all finding ways to work with each other for the first time in live scenarios, well, close to live scenarios without pads. So I don't put too much onto the struggles of the offense at all at this point. I would say the defensive line has looked better than the offensive line. We've also seen the offensive line be banged up a little bit. Ryan Bates missed practice today. Spencer Brown is on the mend and trying to come back as well. We've seen different offensive line combinations. So I think the defensive line has definitely looked good. I would say they've looked very good. But I'm not going to say the offensive line has looked bad given the circumstances of the context. Ooh, good question from Jessica. Do you think our practice squad is going to get real poached this year? You know what? I thought it would a little bit last year, and we didn't see too many. I think, again, it's all, this is like an obvious statement, but it's all going to depend on who they put down to that practice squad. But given the level of talent, I wouldn't be completely surprised, but I feel like a lot of teams and fans always think this going into, it's like, man, our roster's loaded. Like, we're not gonna be able to get anybody on the practice squad. And then you end up getting like most of your guys. I think there's a few here or there, as always. Like, again, Nick McLeod got grabbed last year when the Bills put him down. Cincinnati scooped him up, and then Cincinnati tried to do the same thing, and the Bills scooped him right back. So I think it depends on who is going down, and Bean is always very cognizant of that with how they build this roster. So I wouldn't say real poached. I think you have a chance to get one or two players grabbed. Usually there's just not, teams usually aren't losing like 3, 4, 5 guys when it comes to the practice squad poaching. Ooh, Eric, where's James Cook lining up and when taking receiver reps? That's an excellent question, Eric, and I really want to answer it now, but I'm going to answer it later in this episode when we break down James Cook's rookie status reports. That's fantastic. Why saying who will be involved in the first camp fight? Might have been Diggs and Elam a little bit today because they got a little chippy. We'll see. My man. Michael Luke is fantastic, saying just jumping in and say, hey, excited to have gotten to hang out with you in the Cover One crew again. By the way, you missed a great show. Yeah, we were all together. A lot of us, myself and the Cover One team, in addition to Michael and several of the members of the Cover One, premium Slack channel, all hanging out at St. John Fisher on Sunday. And I had to call it early. I had to make a trip on Monday morning, so I had to cut that day a little short towards the afternoon and miss some of the fun hangout festivities after. But yeah, it was a good day, and I appreciate you, Michael. What else do we got? Oh, there's Mark. Pads on Saturday. Yeah, I couldn't remember Friday or Saturday. Oh, excellent question from Earl Scott. Thoughts on Triple H running WWE now? I haven't watched WWE for a while because I thought it was terrible. I've kept tabs on it, and then with all the less than favorable things with Vince McMahon, I just didn't feel comfortable watching in general. But now that he's fully out, Triple H is running the show. Listen, when Triple H, granted, it's a different production level and scale. When Triple H was running the show in NXT, that was the second best wrestling program in the world behind New Japan. AEW came up, overtook NXT. NXT has been gutted and changed completely. With Triple H running the show, I have high hopes. I also think you might see some wrestlers returning potentially, but I think the product gets better right away because he's just tapped in and better for the current times and better for the on-screen wrestling product than Vince was in this time. Oh, what's up, Vito? Oh, Vito saying my wife loves Snoopy's fit. That's right. I got little Snoopy over there rocking the American stuff. Good red, white, and blue, America, 4th of July, birthdays, all that kind of stuff. And then he says, any Cover One folks at camp this coming Monday or Tuesday? I will not be. I don't know. I'll have to check with the team. I know everybody's kind of up and down now with their schedules and what we see. Good question. Good comment here from Steven saying we all want Trey back by opening day, but this may be a blessing in disguise for Elam and Jackson getting some top-notch experience. It will only make the Bills better. We're going to talk about that when it comes to Kaiir Elam. Good comment here from Jason as well in relation to practice squad guys getting poached. Yeah, 31 other teams have 16 practice squad players too. It doesn't really happen very often. Mark saying David Questenberry, first reserve on the O-line or starting right tackle? First reserve. I think he's really only been a starter because Spencer Brown is getting worked in slowly. Even off the bat on day one, Spencer Brown was working in a little bit with second and third team to try and keep it light. But a lot of times when the team was going, full team offense versus defense, he was off to the side, just kind of running gassers and keeping it light. You can tell that he's kind of ramping things up little by little. But the only way Spencer Brown isn't starting day one is if he's hurt or if something extraordinarily bad or good happens in some way, shape, or form that forces him out there. So Quessenberry, is in that first reserve role. You know who's not in a reserve role? The best pizza in Buffalo and the sponsor of this show, One Pie Pizza. The online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any of the podcasting apps or platforms. Go to that online menu for One Pie Pizza and get yourself some of the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Delicious sweet sauce pie, homemade. I almost said handmade. Well, I guess it is handmade. Homemade blue cheese, great cheese to sauce ratio. They're great people making great pizza and great food. I mention it every week, all the drives and initiatives they have, whether it's, partnering with the Alzheimer's Foundation or partnering with Roswell to try and knock out cancer, or the SPCA. They're just so giving and kind to the community and to humanity in general. So go get yourself some One Pie Pizza, treat your taste buds, and do some good for the world and the community by getting yourself some One Pie Pizza. And then the other partner for the Cover One channel, Underdog Fantasy. Download the Underdog Fantasy app, and when you do, use the promo code Cover1 that's right up here on the screen, the word cover and the number one. If you're listening, again, that's just cover and the number one, all one word, capital C. Use that promo code when you download the Underdog Fantasy app, and Underdog will match your first deposit up to $100. So you have the opportunity to get $100 free from Underdog just by using that Cover One promo code. My favorite thing with Underdog is their best ball action. I love being able to draft teams now and get as we ramp up and get towards the fantasy season, but also knowing that I can draft these teams and I can just set it and forget it. I'm done for the rest of the year. I draft these teams, I let the fates decide and kind of, go through, and they have different levels, Best Ball Mania and, the Puppy and all their different leagues and all the different types of opportunities for you to, compete. And it's really one of the best platforms out there. Tremendously proud to have them as a sponsor. You can find the link in the episode description here, again, on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. Go download the Underdog Fantasy app or go to the site, use that promo code, sign up, get yourself some free money and potentially win some more good stuff. Anybody here joining us live here on the episode, while you're here, please drop a like on this video here on YouTube. If you are listening later, watching later, whatever you have, please drop a like on this video as well. Any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review. If you are on Apple or Spotify, leave a star rating and a review. It's tremendously helpful towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Now, we start to move on here. And the first thing that we're going to talk about here in this episode are the personnel packages, alignments, and what they mean. See, Deckard's got it. He says like and subscribe. Fantastic. And the follow-up with Mark, Quessenberry had some time at right guard today because Bates was out today. Tommy Doyle was at right tackle, and then Quessenberry was at guard, but he's kind of just freeing up all over the place. We're going to dive into the personnel packages, alignments, and what they mean. So what I noticed immediately off of, practice right away on day one, especially in the red zone, was how many of the heavier personnel packages the Bills were engaging in. So 2 tight end sets, 3. And again, this is also going to depend on how you define Reggie Gilliam. Do you call him a tight end? Do you call him a fullback? That'll define like if you're going 2 tight ends or 2 running backs, 13 personnel and all that kind of stuff. But we saw a lot of sets with 3 tight ends, if you're including Gilliam as a tight end, or even if you're not, you saw heavier personnel formations. You saw a lot of reps with Dawson Knox, OJ Howard, and Reggie Gilliam on the field getting work. And then, we have Dawson Knox's presser yesterday, and he talks about saying we've already started doing more 13 personnel and 22 personnel with Reggie Gilliam on the field. And Knox says, through the first 2 days here at practice, we've seen more 13 personnel than we did all of last year. 13 personnel means you have 3 tight ends, 1 running back, 3 tight ends. And I think that's a good thing. And one, first off the bat, I think a lot of people hear that. They hear heavier personnel and bigger packages and more tight ends and more running backs and a fullback or whatever have you. And I think a lot of people think, okay, that means they're going to run the football more. And oh my goodness, this is Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox. This should be a passing team. Like, this should be a passing team. We're going heavier personnel. Does that mean they're going to run the ball more? One, just because they're going with heavier personnel does not necessarily mean that's going to be a run. In fact, one of the advantage of having those heavier personnel looks is if you have those, we'll say tight end, for example, if you've got 2 tight ends you can easily run out of that formation. You have more options because you have the opportunity to have like a 7-man surface up front with the 5 offensive linemen and the 2 tight ends blocking. You can run zone, you can run gap, you can get to anything and everything, outside, inside, just a variety of options in the run and in pass protection as well. But there's a lot you can do in the run. So that's fair, and that's step one. But also, if your tight ends are able to function in the pass game and in the receiving game like Dawson Knox and like OJ Howard, you have that mismatch potential. It's something I mentioned all offseason. That Patriots offense with Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez was so difficult to defend because both guys could function in the run game, but there were also mismatches in the pass game. Because if you're going with that heavier personnel, if you're going with 2 tight ends, if the defense wants to stay with a light box, or if they want to go nickel and have 5 defensive backs on the field, you have that mismatch potential because that nickel defender is going to have to cover a bigger body, and you have the opportunity to beat up that nickel defender, whether in the run or in the pass, set yourself up with a mismatch potential. So does the defense have to bring in another linebacker? Do they have to bring in another safety? Okay, do they have to bring another man into the box or towards the line of scrimmage? Do you now force a team to go from a 2 high safety look to a single high safety look, which we know the Bills love to attack single high safety and man coverage, whether on their own or in tandem? Using these personnel packages, these heavier personnel groupings, is a true way for you to dictate to the defense. So just going with heavier personnel packages, that doesn't mean you're going to run more, but it does make you less predictable, because going with those sets and those looks, they can be both a simultaneously a run and a pass look. If you compare it to, going 5 wide, full spread, 3 to the right and 2 to the left or whatever have you, and it's just Josh Allen. Yeah, it could be like a QB draw or a QB sweep or a QB power, but the defense can, whether studying tape and looking at numbers and metrics and figure out tendencies, they can kind of surmise, okay, this is probably going to be a pass. But if you're sitting there in a 2 tight end look, the world is your oyster. There is no tendency. I mean, there will be some tendency, but it could be a run. It could be a pass. It could be a variety of run types. It could be a variety of pass types. You can attack with multiple concepts. If you add in motion of any kind, you help discern what the defense is doing, create further mismatches. Like, there's just so much you can do when you've got these heavier personnel packages. And I think a lot of us have been looking at it from the perspective of 12 personnel with the addition of OJ Howard. But if you're going Howard and Knox and Reggie Gilliam, who's an athlete, as mentioned earlier, the comment here, I think Eric said it, Reggie Gilliam's a football player. He looked good last year down the stretch. He was very helpful. He was functioning in that fullback role, but he can also function in kind of an H-back role. And that's a good piece for this Bills offense. And I think it also ties into what Ken Dorsey said in his presser today. So he was asked about the personnel groupings, and Ken Dorsey said, we're trying to maximize all of our personnel groupings and not rely on any one guy. We're trying to figure out what guys do best. That also ties into what Sean McDermott said yesterday, was saying that, the team needs to develop an identity. Where the Bills are right now, the stage that they're at, again, we're 4 days into training camp. They're trying to find out who they are as a team, philosophically and systematically, based on identifying their strengths and how they're going to ebb and flow. And granted, as the season progresses, they'll formulate that identity further and really cement it. But right now, they're trying to maximize everything. They are trying out everything, which is why you're seeing different formations. You're seeing different alignments. You're seeing Khalil Shakir on the outside as more of an X receiver, even though he's, traditionally a slot guy. You saw that from Jamison Crowder as well. You're seeing Reggie Gilliam in that movement role and in an H-back role and a variety of personnel packages. That's why Dawson Knox is saying, man, we've run more 13 personnel than we have, the first 2 years and all this types of stuff. The Bills right now are trying to develop their identity and figure out who they are going into the season, and potentially by extension, who they are as the season progresses. And exactly like Ken Dorsey said, they're trying to maximize all of their personnel groupings and trying to figure out what guys do best. So a lot of it is trial and error and experimentation. Like, okay, how do we feel in these 2 tight end looks? Okay, how do we feel if OJ Howard is the Y and Dawson Knox, gets split out? How do we feel if those roles are reversed? How does it look if James Cook and Devin Singletary are both on the field at the same time? How does it feel if Cook is in the slot or if McKenzie's in the backfield? Trial and error, experimentation, figuring out what you can do, what your players can do, how to best utilize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. So part of it in those personnel packages and those alignments and what they mean, first and foremost, it's again trying to maximize your personnel groupings, maximizing your player strengths. I don't think necessarily because the Bills have shown a lot of heavy personnel early in training camp, that means, oh, okay, this is what they're going to be. We're going to see a ton of O.J. Howard and a ton of Dawson Knox and a ton of Reggie Gilliam. I don't think that. Still right now, my thoughts are it's going to be a week-to-week thing. I think, I'm just making this up for an example, week 1, you could see a ton of 12 personnel. Week 2, you might barely see any. Week 1, you might see a ton of Reggie Gilliam, and maybe you don't see him again until week 4. Or maybe you don't see any. Maybe Reggie Gilliam is inactive for week 1, and then he's a focal point of the offense in week 2, 3, and 4. I think the game plan every week for the offense is going to be very matchup dependent. Ken Dorsey has talked about wanting to attack his opponents in a variety of ways, and doing that is going after their weaknesses. You want to spam those attacks that you know your opponent struggles against. That's really what being a great team is. Like, you want to have your strengths and you want to play to your strengths. And it's good to know, like, okay, at the end of the day, I know we can do A and we're great at it and we're going to be fine. But it's nice to be able to throw, again, this is one of my favorite themes of this offseason, rock, paper, scissors. It's fine if you're just great at throwing rock, and you can potentially win by throwing rock. But what happens if your opponent throws rock? You want to be able to throw paper. If they throw scissors, cool, smash it. You're fine. You're good to go. Also, what happens if they throw paper and paper covers rock? You got to be able to pivot and be like, cool, let me pull out scissors, and that way you can win. The Bills are trying right now to establish multiplicity and variability in their offense with personnel packages, alignments, and the players that they're using in those packages and in those alignments. What I think you're seeing now isn't necessarily a firm stamp on any one package or grouping. What you're seeing right now is the experimentation. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes, but I just saw this pop up from Ron. Say rock, paper, scissors, let's have it go. Well done, well done. What I think you're seeing now is, and I know comments have been coming through in the chat. You guys know I'm going to cycle back and get at them. But what you're seeing now is the experimentation and the trial and error to develop that baseline of comfortability to figure out who you are and know what you have in your groups and in your players going forward. That's what this is all about right now. You are establishing those baselines. Who teams are right now? I was going to say nobody, but I don't deal in absolutes. Even though I am a Sith, I do consider myself a Sith or a heel. But no team, who they are right now, is not who any team is going to be towards the end of the year. As the season progresses, you find out who you are. You get that firm stamp. You cement your identity, and you really get your rhythm and figure out who you are as a team. But what's important right now is establishing and setting those baselines, setting that floor, so that way you have a foundation from which you can operate, work from, and then go forward. That's why we're seeing all this mixing and matching. I don't think the Bills really, even though the Bills have some different personnel in their wide receiver room, the Bills don't really need to go into 11 and 10 personnel a ton, because that's kind of old hat to them. The Bills don't need to see 3 wide receiver sets with Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis and Isaiah McKenzie. Like, that's old hat. What they do need to see is, okay, how does it feel with Howard and Knox? Okay, how can we use both of them? How does it look with both of those guys and Reggie Gilliam? How does it look with Singletary and Cook? How does it look if we put Crowder over here or Shakir over here, or if we take our traditional slot wide receivers and, again, use them on the outside as an X? What happens if we line them out there and we keep them static from the moment they line up out there, versus if we put them somewhere and then use them in short motion, or use them in cross motion and bring them across the field? One of the other things I mentioned too, we saw Khalil Shakir functioning in a little bit of that Cooper Kupp role that you see in Los Angeles a lot, where he's hipped off of that tight end and he steps inside and kind of folds a little bit and leads a running back between the tackle and the tight end, picks up a second level defender, and is kind of like a lead blocker coming through the hole. We saw Khalil Shakir do that, granted without pads. We saw him do that on day one. That's what you're going to see with this team right now, especially on the offensive side of the ball, especially with a new first-time offensive coordinator and a new quarterbacks coach and a new offensive line coach. This side of the ball is figuring out their identity. The defense, they know who they are. They know what coverages they're playing. They know how to communicate one another. The whole defense basically ran it back. You have Kaiir, Elaim, and you've got Von Miller and some new guys up front, but that's easier to kind of build given the core that's already established and the continuity and the coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. The offense, again, tying it back to what Ken Dorsey said, I'm going to keep reiterating it. Ken Dorsey said, we're trying to maximize all of our personnel groupings and not rely on any one guy. We're trying to figure out what guys do best. And that ties into with what Sean McDermott said the other day, saying that we need to find an identity. What this part of training camp is about for the offense right now is finding out who they are philosophically and systematically based on their strengths and based on how they can function and flow, how they fit, again, into that rock, paper, scissors offense. That's what they want to be. That's what Ken Dorsey wants to be. Ken Dorsey wants to have a pivot. He wants multiple tools in his toolbox. He wants, multiple weapons in the arsenal, bullets in the chamber, gun in the holster, whatever you want to go with. He wants to be able to pivot and know, like, okay, is this week going to be a vertical passing game? Okay, is this week going to be quick game? Is this week going to be more RPO? Is this week going to be zone run? Is this week going to be read option? Is this week going to be gap run? He wants to be able to maximize all of that and know, again, if he has to use one of those and maximize one of those, he knows what the baseline is and what the potential ceiling is for each of those personnel packages, each of those players in those situations. And tying it into something else Ken Dorsey said today is he wants a fast, physical, disciplined offense. Things like lowering pad level, run after catch, splitting defenders, and maximizing yardage on every touch. He said he wants the players to be fast with speed. He wants them to finish runs. He wants to get the ball in their hands and have them be explosive and making plays with the ball in their hands. Again, lowering pads, splitting defenders, trying to get that extra yard or two, and then being disciplined with assignments and being in the right spots. He wants a fast, physical, disciplined offense. Maybe this leads to some more yards after the catch. I thought that was very interesting that he, was asked specifically about that, mentioned that they had spoken about it this offseason and in the beginning of camp, and mentioned, again, words like those buzzwords, mentioning, being explosive and making plays with the ball in our hands. That was something I didn't think we saw a lot last year, and that's something I kind of want to mention real quick. There are a lot of takes on the lack of run after catch or yards after catch, whatever verbiage you're going with. There wasn't really an opportunity for a lot of that last year. Cole Beasley is the prototypical example of it. A lot of people like to knock Cole Beasley for his, yards after catch and be like, oh, he couldn't make plays after the catch. He wasn't really set up for that. The Bills offense wasn't designed for that. If you're running a 7-yard hitch and you're finding, space in the defense and leveraging that space and you make that catch, there's a good chance you're surrounded by a minimum of 2 defenders. And so you're just catching the ball, turning, defenders are descending down upon you, and you're just like, all right, cool, boom, you get hit, you go down. This offense last year didn't really lend itself to run after the catch. Then you add in things like ball placement from Josh Allen and throws and the execution piece, and that's when things kind of snowball a little bit. Maybe that's why you don't see that. Maybe you get more of a concerted effort from Ken Dorsey in there. I wanted to mention that because I know it's a big concern for people, the run after catch. It's not necessarily for me. I'm cool with it if it happens, but I don't think that's a piece where I'm sitting here going, the Bills need more run after catch. They need a Deebo Samuel type role in this offense. I don't necessarily think that's true. But I wanted to mention that as well. But again, you're seeing these packages and all these alignments, these personnel groupings, and how these players are being used. I think this is Ken Dorsey starting to put his stamp and his fingerprints on this offense because he wants to be multiple. He wants to be varied. He wants to play rock, paper, scissors. He wants to attack his opponent in the best way he can to maximize, his team's strengths and expose and work at his opponent's weaknesses. And in order to do that, you got to figure out everything you have. You got to be able to open that drawer, see everything you have in front of you and figure out, okay, like, what can I do with that? What can I do with that? How strong is that? How weak is that? Okay, I know all these things. And then you can figure out come regular season and come week to week matchups and opponents, you can figure out what dial to turn up, what dial to turn down, when to turn them up, when to turn them down. And you are a complete master of your domain in every sense of the word. And I think that's what you're seeing right now with all these packages, alignments, and what they mean. I don't think it necessarily means guaranteed you're going to see heavy personnel a ton. You're going to see a ton of 2 tight end sets. You're going to see a ton of Reggie Gilliam. I don't necessarily think that's true for every given week. Again, I think it's going to be matchups dictating what the Bills do offensively on a week-to-week basis, what dials they turn up, what dials they turn down. And right now, again, in order to be able to you want to be able to play with all the dials. If you've got 10 dials in front of you, you want to be able to turn and lower all 10. You don't want to be able to just turn and lower 2 or 5 or 6 or 7. You want to maximize everything. That's what Ken Dorsey is doing right now with this offense, throwing all these personnel groupings, mixing and matching different players, experimenting with them in different alignments and in different roles, figuring out what he's got in order to put it all together. Also, one more piece I wanted to mention. People see I mentioned earlier, people see the heavier personnel package and they think like, oh no, that means the Bills are going to run the ball more. This is a passing team. That's bad. I don't think that's a bad thing. The Bills, this isn't the NFL from the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, you want to go with, because no NFL like today's NFL has been so skewed towards the pass in terms of the play calling and in terms of the rules. That's where a lot of this comes from. The rules and the style of today's NFL plays to teams that are able to pass the ball. You have a bigger advantage if you have a star quarterback. You can throw the ball over the field because, again, you can't touch receivers, you can't touch quarterbacks. There's so many rules put in place now to make the game more wide open for the passing attack. But regardless of that, you still need to have the run. You still need to establish that. You still need the threat of the run. I don't think the Bills are ever going to be a team where they come through and it's like, okay, they're 50-50 or they're 60-40 in terms of the ratio. Maybe you might see that from a week-to-week basis, but the Bills still need to run the ball. I feel like everybody forgets what this Bills offense was like in the early part of the year when the threat of the run was not present, when the Bills did not have that pivot in the run game for their offense. What it was like against the Jacksonville Jaguars, what it was like in the second half of the Pittsburgh Steelers, what it was like at those moments when the Bills were so one-dimensional that it became easy for defenses to spot tendency and attack and play off of the predictability of the Bills offense. You need the run. I'm not saying it's got to be a specific ratio. It doesn't have to be 60-40 or 70-30, whatever have you. It has to be enough that defenses have to honor that piece. They have to honor the run. The perfect example I want to use, I just put this tweet out right before this episode happened. The Bills use RPOs, run pass options, 19% of the time in 2021. That was the sixth most in the NFL. The basic idea of an RPO, of a run pass option, usually. So again, that's the look. It's different than a read option, but that's the look where Josh and Singletary are in the backfield. Josh snaps the ball. He puts it in Singletary's stomach, and then he decides to either give it to Singletary or keep it and throw. Usually what is happening on those plays, Josh is keying a second-level defender. We'll just say it's the nickel corner. For this instance, we'll just say like nickel corner, apex defender, overhang, star, whatever you want to label it as. We'll just say that's who it is, right? So Josh is keying in on that defender. If that defender sits and stays, Josh's direction is to hand the ball off. If the defender bites up on that run action, Josh is going to keep the ball and he's going to throw it to that route that goes into that vacated space. What we were seeing early in the year, because the threat of the run was not there, defenses were just sitting and going, oh, we're not going to bite because we're not scared of the run. We don't care. We're going to defend the pass at all costs. And then the Bills were running in those scenarios, and because their running attack wasn't strong or good enough at that point, they weren't taking advantage of light boxes. They weren't making defenses pay. And then if Josh wanted to keep the ball anyway and be like, screw it, I'm going to keep it, I'm going to pass it anyway, you don't have the matchup numbers. You don't have the numbers advantage or the coverage advantage in the secondary. The defense does because they have more guys versus the less routes that are going on there. So that's just one aspect, let alone what the run does for your offense in general and for the pass in general. The pass is your fastball for the Buffalo Bills, which is completely fine. No good pitcher just throws one pitch like that. Even Mariano Rivera with his cutter, he had secondary and third and tertiary pitches, right? You need that secondary pitch. If you've got that great fastball, you need a changeup or a slider or a curve, something off speed, some kind of breaking pitch to keep the hitter honest. So they can't just come up to the plate and look fastball and wait for the fastball and just sit on fastball. You can't have that. And again, that doesn't mean, just like in baseball, that doesn't mean like, okay, for every 7 fastballs, you got to throw 3 changeups. That's not how it works. But it has to be present enough and successful enough to the point that that hitter has it in the back of their mind, be like, okay, well, it could be a changeup here. I got to watch for the changeup. Same thing with the defenses. That back quarter of the year, that stretch for to finish the regular season in 2021 and that stretch into the playoffs, you stopped seeing defenses just sit no matter what on those RPO looks. You started to see them bite and come forward on those RPO looks. And that's when Josh would hit, Diggs on a free access or a glance route or, Gabriel Davis behind them or Dawson Knox behind them, you started to see that space being vacated. Things became easier for this offense. It became easier for Josh Allen because teams could not solely key in on Josh Allen. They had to factor in, okay, well, all right, it could be a run. So there's a run action. All right, cool. I got to come up. I got to honor that. Oh, it's actually a pass, and Stephon Diggs is wide open behind me. The threat of the run is real. It needs to be present. The Bills are a pass-first team. They're going to continue to be a pass-first team, but they need to have the run. Every team needs it. It's a reason why Kansas City got bogged down a little bit last year, similar to the Bills, why it seemed like both of those offenses were having to squeeze blood from a stone in the early part of the year because teams were daring them to run versus light boxes, and they either weren't or they weren't executing. When we had Mitch Morse on the film room, tremendous episode, shameless plug, go take a look at when myself and Kendall Mursky and Eric Turner sat down and we talked ball for about an hour with Bills starting center Mitch Morse. And he said it last year right out of the gate. He said, teams called our bluff early in the year. They gave us light boxes and we didn't make them pay. He said it right off the bat. So this isn't just film analysis from our end. This isn't just speculation and looking at numbers and tying it together with the film. This is from the mouth of the Bills starting center last year and their starting center coming into this year. He knows the importance of the run. And you can tell, again, look at the difference in how the offense flowed the back end of the year. Granted, maybe they were playing different opponents, a different caliber of defenses, which is fair, but they had a pivot in the run game. Specifically, they had a gap scheme running attack. They were able to execute pin and pulls and powers and counters and just a variety of, again, gap scheme runs to attack defenses and keep them honest. That needs to be present in this offense to some degree, to some level. So in summary, for this talking point here, when you see those personnel packages, alignments, and what they mean, right now the Bills are trying to figure out their identity on offense, and they're trying to figure out what dials they can turn up, when and where, maximize those position groupings so they know what they have come regular season when they can use all those personnel packages and alignments and groupings to attack defenses in whatever way they choose to. And also within that, so when you're seeing those heavier personnel packages, that doesn't necessarily mean, oh my God, they've seen the most 13 personnel. Dawson Knox has seen the most 13 personnel these first several days than he has his first 2 years. That's got to be what this team is going to be this year. One, no, not necessarily. Two, if you're worried that means this is going to be a run-first team, it still isn't going to. Although, again, that personnel grouping allows you, like we talked about earlier, to dictate to more of the defense because it limits tendency and predictability. But also, third point, you need to have the run. Even if you're a pass-first team, the threat and presence of the run needs to be there, especially if you're the Bills and defenses are going to give you light boxes. Those are easy yards. You have to take advantage of them. You have to make the defense pay. That's why the threat of the run is needed for the Bills offense and really for any offense. Again, you can't just go up and throw fastball after fastball after fastball. You need that changeup. You need that curveball. You need an off-speed pitch. That's what the Bills have in their run game. The fastball is the pass. The changeup and the off-speed, that's the run game. You need to have it. It's important. You can't allow defenses to sit and force your hand, whether it's RPOs or any look in general. Now, I see a lot of comments. I'm going to backtrack. I'm going to take a sip of water. Then we're going to back up here. Ooh, comment here from Eric. Bigger packages may help Zach Moss. I hate shotgun runs. I'm stating my preference. I mentioned it on Twitter in several episodes this offseason, going back and watching the tape last year. I actually don't think Zach Moss was as bad as everybody, I feel like, seems to think he was. And then when you add in the piece from Brandon Beane talking about his ankle wasn't 100% coming off of surgery last year, and so that limited how he could cut and run, it could be very interesting to see what we get from Zach Moss this year. Steven saying, phew, got out of that meeting as fast as I could. Sorry, I'm late. No worries, Steven. All that matters is that you're here now. Jessica saying, do you think Josh is ready to take the next step and call his own plays in a hurry-up offense? I don't know if he isn't already doing that, but I have confidence in him, yes. I think he is getting to the point where he is kind of in control of this offense in one way or another, and his input either carries weight or he's at that point where, yeah, he can run the show a little bit. Oh, good comment here from Steven. Steven saying, is it not possible that the offense is running those 13 personnel packages in camp to try and help the defense who may be forced into running a base defense instead of nickel? Leslie Frazier said that teams try to draw them out of nickel. He did. He mentioned how teams don't like when they go nickel. And then also mentioned why Taron Johnson is such an important player because he has that ability to be that nickel defender, that slot defender, but he can also fit the run like a linebacker and bigger guy. So they're not out advantage there. It's a possibility, Stephen. And actually, Leslie Frazier mentioned how they'll give certain looks offensively and defensively in training camp and in practice to one another to allow the other side of the ball to work on certain things to get better. So very fair. Comment here from Taylor. Excited to see the speed of James Cook pop out from behind our huge O-line. Pops Mafia saying Shakir and Cook on kickoff return, shake and bake. Jason says, and when, if you are, do we get to critique your 53-man roster projection? I've never done a roster projection. I've actually never even thought about it. So maybe I will. Fair comment. Pops with a question. Can Shaq Lawson and AJ Epinesa both make the roster? Yes, most definitely. In fact, I think they both will. 53-man roster projection. It ties back into Jason's comment. Yes, I think they both can make the roster, and I also think they both will. Or Epinesa does really well and then gets used as trade bait. Jessica says, take that rock and smack that like button for Ant. I think it's a fantastic comment. Again, I know it's corny and it's cheesy to shill out for likes and support and things like that. But if you are enjoying this video or any of the content that I put out in general, please drop a like on this video. It goes a long way towards helping myself. And again, the entire team at Cover One to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears kind of helps the algorithm a little bit. So please and thank you. If you are enjoying this, please drop a like. And thank you very much for that comment, Jessica. I appreciate you. I said I was a Sith earlier, and Taylor said Siths don't have Christmas trees. I'm one of a kind, Taylor. And so I have a Christmas tree. Also, it helps throw the people off the Sith trail because they'd see that and be like, oh, that guy's got to be a Jedi. He's got a Christmas tree. False, Taylor. I am a Sith, true and true. Through and through, not true and true. That's not a thing. Ron says here, yes, Singletary and Cook in the backfield at the same time. We've seen that a little bit already, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit. Steven saying, can Shakir block? What was his draft rep? Some people have called him out for his blocking a little bit, saying that he lacks the will or the want to in his blocking. I would say he's inconsistent at times, but I've also seen several reps where he's really in it and getting after it in the run block aspect. And I just know how the Bills function. If that's going to be asked of him, it's something that he's going to have to do where he's not going to see the field. He can block. Depending on where you look, certain sites would knock him for his run blocking. Certain sites would give him credit and just say like, oh, it's not a strength, but he's fine. And other people were like, oh, he lacks a willingness to block. I didn't see the willingness. I didn't think he was a plus blocker when he did need to make a play in the run blocking aspect. There's a really good clip. Steven, if you go on Twitter and just look up literally Khalil Shakir block, there's one on a screen from I think 2018 or 19 where he's 30 yards downfield, just driving his corner downfield on a screen. So the effort, it can be there at times. I'm not worried about his blocking. No. Taylor saying everyone is sleeping on Shakir. He's starting to wake up people a little bit. And, I'm going to here. Any other comments here? Oh, little love for Blackshear. Yeah, he looked actually pretty good right off the bat on camp on Sunday. Quick out of the backfield, speedy, burst, elusive. Yeah, I like that. Awesome for Ned. Ned saying, hey, Ant, sorry I'm late, but it's never too late to smash the like button. That's right, Ned. And everyone, it's never too late. Hooray, yay, team. Oh, yes, Jessica, mentioned Jessica coming back and saying heavy with Howard, Doyle, Gilliam, and Knox. You could see a heavy package like that, but the heavier personnel, I'm talking more just traditional tight ends and fullbacks. So more of two tight ends and a fullback, potentially. So seeing what we've seen a lot in camp so far are sets with OJ Howard, Dawson Knox, and Reggie Gilliam. Actually, a couple reps too with Howard, Knox, and Tommy Sweeney as well. What else do we got? Anything else? If someone made a really good comment, oh, I knew it. Appreciate you, Ron. Yeah, I did freeze. I don't know what happened. What else? Oh, good question from Steven. Steven says Shakir has short arms, right? And does his ability to catch away from his body mitigate that? Yeah, he's really good at off-frame catches. He's actually shown it so far in camp already. His hands are tremendous. He's making off-frame catches in the red zone, in drills, in team, literally like anywhere and everywhere. He's at a very strong camp. I'm not worried about Khalil Shakir's short arms. And I know some people mentioned that as well in terms of him being a boundary receiver because they're like, oh, well, he's shorter-ish, and he's got short arms. He can't function on the boundary. His release package is tremendous. And so I want to see what he looks like on the boundary. He had about 33% of his career snaps in college came out on the boundary. So he's experienced there, especially in man, but going up against NFL length and size and speed, one-on-one on the outside is a different beast. So I think he has to prove himself on the boundary before we can see what he does out there. I know you didn't ask that, but I just wanted to mention it because I've seen a lot of comments going on. Be wary of comments that come from people. Always, every once in a while, pull some people's cards. And when people tell you, oh, yeah, like this guy does this, be like, really? Where did you see that? Because sometimes people tell on themselves. Fair. Ron saying, did you see much of Tommy Doyle at training camp? Seems almost impossible to get a good read on the O-line before the pads come on. I saw a bit of him. Nothing standoutish either way, positively or negatively. But again, to your point, also given what I was watching for that day, I wasn't honed in on Doyle too much. And again, a lot of it, Ron, to your point, is I'm not really watching trench battles too much until the pads come on. Coverage is a little different. Like even coverage, when you get the pads put on, it's different because you have more surface area to grab and jam and get into conflict. But you can see how a corner is functioning in coverage and a receiver is functioning in their routes. You get more of a realistic factor even without pads than you do in the trenches. So that's fair. Paul with a great comment. Can we call Shakir T-Rex for the short arms and being an apex predator? If you can get some signs on that petition, I'll allow it. Good question from Jason. Shakir's arms compared to Mackenzie's. I feel like they're probably a little shorter, but nothing to a significant degree. Good comments, good thoughts. Let's shift gears a little bit, especially, it's perfect with all these comments coming through about Khalil Shakir and some on James Cook. We're going to shift focus now on this episode, and we're going to talk as the banner shows here. Again, some of you are on audio only, so you don't see the banner, but the banner says training camp status reports for the rookies and potential impact. What we are going to do now is dive into the performance so far of several rookies and talk about, again, not just talk about, oh yeah, like this guy did good, this guy did bad, end of the episode. We're going to talk about what it means from a practical application standpoint going forward for this team. Again, the X's and O's, the hows and whys, all of that stuff. We're going to start with Mr. Khalil Shakir, who several of you have already mentioned so far in this episode. He was an immediate standout for me right away on day one and on day two of training camp. Again, the off-frame catches, the route running, how he was being used in, a Cooper Kupp fashion and, being hipped off the tight end and leading a run inside, being used as an X receiver, being used in short motion and just a variety of things, and how he was able to continuously separate. Again, my two favorite traits of his or skill set pieces, however you look at it, from college were his release package and his ability to separate in multiple routes, in multiple concepts, in multiple points, multiple situations, whether in the stem or on the break. He's just a very crafty route runner. And he was as advertised already in camp. I think he's had, if we're voting right now for who's had the best training camp so far for the Buffalo Bills, Khalil Shakir is up there towards the top. And again, the separation, the hands, the functionality, the versatility that he's displayed, he has really just come out with a bang. His route running is crisp. Again, separating on multiple routes in a multitude of scenarios, several very strong off-frame catches. And I think what's also very key to tie this into as well is Jamison Crowder has now missed 3 days in a row of training camp with general soreness and tightness. With Crowder missing that time, the door is wide open for Khalil Shakir. Less Crowder equals more reps for Shakir. What we were seeing on day one was Crowder, well, McKenzie was getting to work with the ones, and then we were seeing Crowder get to work with the twos, and Shakir was a little bit with the twos, and then a lot with the threes. If Crowder is out, it gives more of an opportunity to Khalil Shakir. He gets more of a baptism by fire. He gets to work against second and first team guys. He is that next man up with Crowder out, because that competition for that slot receiver spot or that third receiver spot, depending on how you want to look at it, is between Jamison Crowder, Isaiah McKenzie, and Khalil Shakir. If Crowder is out, again, this is easy math, bump that next guy up. That three-man competition becomes a two-man competition. And with how good Shakir has looked, it could not come at a worse time for Jamison Crowder to be missing practices and be giving up more reps to a guy who already looked good. So that's something to really key in on. Not only is Khalil Shakir having a very strong camp, but Jamison Crowder isn't really having one because he's missed 3 practices in a row. Crowder has a track record of injuries going back to his time in Washington. Many of them are soft tissue injuries. And it was one of the questions I had about him coming into the season with everybody, putting high hopes on him, is he's had durability questions. And when you've got those soft muscle injuries, those soft tissue injuries, those tend to come back time and time again. And I know a lot of people thought, okay, well, the Bills medical staff and treatment facilities are fantastic. Knock on wood, they're great at prevention and recovery. Maybe that helps. And again, maybe this is just general soreness and tightness. But it's not good to know that training camp started and just after one day, you had to miss the next 3 days, whether it's preventative or recovery, whatever have you. And this is something that's followed Crowder wherever he's gone. And it seems like they're rearing their ugly head already this early on, which again is very unfortunate for him. But as terrible as this sounds, it is a plus for Khalil Shakir because he keeps crushing it day after day. Again, route running, separation, release package, hands. Then we're going to see what happens when the pads come on. His run after catch ability is legit. When he gets the ball in his hands, he's like a running back. He doesn't go down. He's got spin moves. He's got agility. He's got power. He's got a low center of gravity with that stature and that base and his frame. Shakir is having a very good camp. And when we're talking about the long-term aspect of this team, Jamison Crowder's on a 1-year deal. McKenzie isn't signed long-term either. You would think Shakir is the longest, in terms of, term on his contract left, being drafted in the 5th round and having a 4-year deal because of that. Right now, he is the long-term potential answer. I've maintained this, throughout this offseason that he would see more significant snaps and reps as the season went on. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the regular season, he was in like a 50-50 timeshare or something close to that for the slot receiver spot or third wide receiver spot, just with how good of a fit he is in this offense and how good his skill set fits again with this offense and how good that he is, or at least I thought he was in college. But he has advertised, right, he just kept popping left and right off the bat on Sunday. And when I was there, I wasn't watching for Shakir like purposefully. I was just kind of like taking it all in at first. And it just seemed like I kept like being attracted left and right. And I was like, oh, it's Shakir. Oh, it's Shakir again. He just kept making plays and he keeps making plays and Crowder keeps not being able to practice. I also don't think it's crazy if Crowder can't stay healthy, if he doesn't make this final roster, especially if maybe you get something like Isaiah Hodgins comes out of nowhere and, plays fantastically. And maybe they're like, you know what? He's starting to look good and Crowder's not really, healthy. He can't stay healthy. Again, I think that's a long shot. He would really have to be banged up and not practice at all. But Shakir is crushing it. And the fact that it's coming in conjunction with Jamison Crowder missing time, all it does is increase the chances that Khalil Shakir is more heavily involved in this offense earlier in the year because he's getting his feet wet more now because he's getting those extra reps because Crowder is not in there. Very, very important. Also, someone who's doing very well from a rookie standpoint, we're going to stay on the offensive side of the ball, James Cook. His receiving ability is real. Again, someone who is as advertised from the receiving perspective, much like James Cook. I was, coming out of Georgia, we broke him down in the film room. We've talked about him several times on the show. I was just very impressed on tape with how he ran his routes out of the backfield and how he understands coverages and soft spots and how he understands how to leverage a defender in his routes. The level at which he does that on tape is not common for running backs, let alone rookie running backs. He's come into Bill's training camp, and whether he's working with the 3s or the 2s or the 1s, he is as advertised. He is winning out of the backfield consistently on option routes, on angle routes. He is winning in the flats, over the middle, getting vertical. You are seeing him being deployed in a multitude of ways. Sometimes, go to that comment that was mentioned earlier, sometimes in 2 running back sets with Devin Singletary, which is fun. He is as advertised. I am very impressed with James Cook, the receiver, just because, not because he's not doing anything that I hadn't seen before, but the fact that he's doing it already against NFL competition. It looks like he hasn't missed a beat. Like he looks very strong from the receiving aspect. I'm very excited to see the pads come on Saturday and see what he looks like in the run game. As I've continued to mention this offseason, to take a quick drink of water here. As I've continued to mention all offseason, James Cook needs to be effective as a runner in terms of like the actual run game and as a pass protector. Because if he's just used as a receiving threat and he's only plus matchup in that one silo, and he's either a minus or a deficiency or a vulnerability in the other 2, that's a tendency giveaway for a defense, and it makes you predictable, which you don't want. You want that receiving ability in James Cook for potential mismatches, but also to reduce your predictability and have that, again, that formational personnel ability to dictate to the defense and keep them off balance. But regardless, we'll see that when the time comes. He is as advertised again in the passing game, just again, consistently and continuously leveraging defenders, knowing, okay, I'm going to go inside on this route. I know how to set up my defender outside and beat them inside and create space. He's separating underneath. He's consistently winning again. And this is against whether it's first team, second team, third, he's consistently winning left and right. And very, very, very impressed with his receiving ability already on display. Like he's real at this point. Now I'm going to switch to the defensive side of the ball. Terrel Bernard, very comfortable in coverage already. He had a rep that caught my eye early, again on Sunday, red zone work. Dawson Knox runs a drag, I think from about maybe like the 5-yard line, and Bernard matches it, gets right into his hip pocket, is all over him. Josh tries to fit it into a tight window. Bernard doesn't allow it to let it happen. The ball gets to Knox's hands, but Bernard rips it out because he's all over him. Really great like tone setter for Bernard for that entire rest of the day in the early part of training camp. He's looked very good in coverage. He's matching running backs out of the backfield. He's matching tight ends. He's responsible in coverage. And we continue to hear about how smart he is and how intelligent he is. And Leslie Frazier spoke about him yesterday. Really insightful stuff from Leslie Frazier talking about Terrel Bernard, saying that Bernard is really good at anticipating and putting himself in position to make plays. He's very smart. He has a good feel for the game. And when you combine that with his athleticism, you have a chance at a really good player. And this is my favorite part about Terrel Bernard that Leslie Frazier said. Frazier said that Bernard spends a lot of time studying, and he's one of those guys that can take the classroom to the grass, meaning he takes what he learns in the off the field settings and he practically applies it on the field. And we continue to hear rave reviews about what goes on in the headspace of Terrel Bernard. Again, how smart he is, the kind of player and person and dude that he is, the functional intelligence, the high football IQ, how much he studies, how much he prepares. We continue to hear very, very, very good things about Terrel Bernard. And again, when you look at it on the field, he's looked good. Again, looked good in coverage. He's as advertised there to a degree as well. Very excited to see for him as well what it looks like when the pads come on. His favorite ability for me is his blitzing ability. When he comes forward, he can either shoot the gap or he comes forward with bad intentions and can just cause chaos by just bull rushing and running into anybody on the line, in the backfield, whoever. He is a walking disruptor and chaos piece when he blitzes. Like he's literally like it gets used a lot for people, but he is a heat-seeking missile when he comes forward on the blitz. So once the pads come on, I'm very excited to see what he becomes. And then going forward for him, Shakir, we talked about, for Khalil Shakir, if Crowder continues to miss time, Shakir's, chances this year of playing were going to be like, okay, is he that fifth receiver or sixth receiver on the team? Is he a primary return man? With Crowder being out, that increases his odds and his chances of being functional and real in the offense. James Cook, I think we already had a vision and a plan for what he was going to be. I think he's going to be used again that receiving option, that mismatch piece. And if he can function in the run, that'll increase the snaps and the reps that he gets as well. But Brandon Beane talked about it when Cook was drafted, that right now he's that sub package type back, but he has the chance to grow and do more. Terrel Bernard is a little different. I don't think his ceiling this year is a starter or starting reps type of player. I think his ceiling this year is that third linebacker role, that AJ Klein role. I think that is Terrel Bernard's ceiling realistically this year in his rookie year. Again, realistically, knock on wood, that's barring any injuries or any extraordinary things from him or horrible play from someone else. I think his ceiling this year is that third linebacker, that AJ Klein role, and special teams contributor. I think that is his ceiling. Realistically, I think it's more of the special teams contributor and potentially fourth linebacker. Terrell Dodson was linebacker 3 in base sets early on in camp. He also had the green dot. He was calling plays for the second team defense. And when the Bills went with a 3 linebacker set with the ones, Dodson was that third linebacker. As things have progressed, we've heard that Bernard is calling plays a little bit more in camp and starting to get his feet wet. But we know they like Tyrel Dodson. We know he's performed a little bit in his time. He is the more known quantity. But it's hard to ignore the continuous rave reviews that Bernard gets. And again, just seeing it firsthand with my own eyes, he's smaller than I thought he'd be. I'll mention that first off. Like when you see him next to Taron Johnson, for example, granted, Taron Johnson is somewhat of a bigger nickel corner. He's 5'11", 192 pounds. Bernard is bigger than that, but Bernard, when you stand him next to Taron Johnson, Bernard standing next to Taron Johnson looks similar than Bernard standing next to Matt Milano, for example. So he is definitely on that smaller side, but he played a lot like the guy who I saw on tape this entire offseason at Baylor. So very, excited for him. Kudos to him for being where he is right now in his mental state. And when you're that hard of a worker and you have that mental side of the game down, it goes a very, very, very long way. Those guys usually have a long career. Maybe not necessarily all pro or tremendously successful, but they usually have a long career in some form or fashion. So he's really been crushing it and doing well. Now we move on to we're going to stay on defense, but we move to the Bills' first round pick, Mr. Kaiir Elam, cornerback out of the University of Florida. Pardon me for the silence there on the audio only version. I had to take another drink. Man, I always forget, like, when I run these solo shows, like, I forget every time, like, how, talking, like, nonstop for, like, an hour. Man, water's important. So, Kaiir Elam, on the positives, his athleticism and his speed have stood out, right from the jump, right off rip in practice. Although I will continue to say, I still don't think he plays as fast as his 40 time indicates. I think he's fast and he's athletic. I don't necessarily know if he's as fast, if he plays as fast in game situations as his 40 time indicates, but nonetheless, you see that athleticism, you see the speed, you see the size and what he's got. Early, we talked about it earlier in this episode because of, him and Stephon Diggs having a little bit of fireworks today in practice, but Elam has been beaten beheadily several times by Stephon Diggs to start training camp. But again, that's fine. Like the old John Harbaugh, iron sharpens iron. It's extremely beneficial for him to get work versus a wide receiver of that caliber early on in training camp. Stephon Diggs is one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL. Kaiir Elam is a rookie. Being able to test your mettle against one of the best, rep after rep, day after day, it only makes you get better. And it only makes the coaching staff find out what they have in Kaiir Elam sooner. Because it's not like he's winning against lower levels of competition. He's going up against the best time and time again. He and Dane Jackson were corners 1 and 2 with the first team. So again, I think that's what a lot of us predicted and anticipated. That's what we've seen already. But he's getting matched up against Diggs a lot, and he was consistently losing. There was one right away on day 1 in red zone where Diggs ran a little jerk route on him, and he made that cut to the outside, and Elam went to go get a hand on him, and Diggs cut back out so fast and got inside that Diggs was gone, and Elam was still like reaching, trying to get a hand on him, and it was just kind of like, where did he go? Like Elam was grasping and pressing at air, like a ghost just vanished in front of his eyes. You're seeing him, and again, I think this is fair. you're seeing him struggle with the technical side of the game right now, which is even better that he's going up against Stephon Diggs, because Stephon Diggs is one of the best technical wide receivers in the NFL. When I say technical, I mean release package, footwork, body language, how to sell routes, how to separate, how to win at multiple points in the stem, how to win in and out of your breaks, how to make every single route look like the exact same route and fool and lie to defenders. Elam needs work on all of that. He needs work on his footwork, his timing, his route recognition, his hand placement. He needs to continue to work on not being too grabby, which is something I noticed right off the bat, again, on day one and a little on day two as well. Of he's still grabby. Like, you're seeing those reps where he tries to get hands on Diggs or anyone, he can't. He's tugging at that jersey hard because he's grabby. He was in college. He didn't call for it a ton, but we know he got flagged in the NFL for that potentially. So that footwork, timing, route recognition, hand placement, being too grabby, transitioning vertically. Stephon Diggs, and really a lot of these Bills receivers, but especially Diggs, he is going to push you to the limit for all of those things. So it's not great that Elam has struggled so far, but I think it's good, if you're trying to find a silver lining here, it's good that we're finding this out right away so we can see how he progresses as training camp goes forward. And I think that's something to keep an eye on, because, he played a little better today, or, got after Diggs a little more today, potentially. But I would say for the most part, he is lost to start training camp. But again, you can learn from your failures. I don't mean lost like he's done, he's terrible, he's awful, I knew he wasn't going to work out. I'm not saying any of that, but hopefully he is learning, which we think he is. He's a big student in the game. We all know the notebook scene from the combine and just how impressed Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott were at his film prep and how he self-scouts. So if anybody can course correct and get better, it'll be Kaiir Elam. And we know he has the physical tools to do so. And this coaching staff is good at getting the best out of their players. But Elam he's been outmatched so far in training camp. And if we're looking at it from a perspective, and again, I don't think this is a big negative for Kaiir Elam because he is a rookie. Right now, Dane Jackson is the second best corner on this team, on the second best outside corner on this team. Taron Johnson, I'm excluding because he's a slot. Dane Jackson right now is the second best outside corner on this team, and it's not close. So we'll see what Kaiir Elam continues to do going forward, but I think it's something to watch because he's lost a lot. Another rookie I wanted to mention, punter, Matt Araiza. He was kind of a sight to behold in person. So this competition with he and Matt Hawk, however real that competition piece is, Matt Hawk was the better punter early on in camp. Hang time, directional kicking, coffin corner style, Matt Hawk won consistently. The concerns about the hang time and directional kicking for Matt Araiza are very real. He struggled several reps in a row with his hang time and his directional kicking. And then a couple reps after that, he shows off the power in his leg and he detonates on his kicks. He had multiple 60-yard punts back-to-back, including several punts over 70 yards. He legitimately has a cannon for a leg, which is super fun. But again, that can cost you field position if he either outkicks the coverage or it ends in a touchback if you don't get that net yardage. Apparently he's done well with his holds. I didn't see him really engage in too many holds early in camp, but reports were that yesterday he was very good, and Tyler Bass nailed all of his kicks from varying distances with Matt Araiza as the holder. We know that's factoring into this punt battle because Matt Hawk is such a good holder, but we'll see what time brings for Araiza. I think everything is very real right now, both positively and negatively for him. Coming out based on the tape, based on the metrics, the book on him was, and this isn't like someone else's book, this is my book. The power's real. He's got the distance. He can boom them, but accuracy in terms of directional kicking and hang time were a question mark. And I think all three of those things are on par right now. He can easily kick it 70 yards. Like, it's not even a question. Like, he just boom. It's really tremendous to see. I know I'm talking about a punter, but I mean, special teams are important, and I like special teams, but he's got a cannon for a leg. But then again, you're watching directional kicking, and they were just doing a basic when you're trying to do a coffin corner, angle it and place it out of bounds within the 10-yard line to the left. And Hawk does it. And then Araiza comes back and kicks it more towards like the middle of the field and around the 15-yard line. So not only does he not get the distance, but he also fails the direction piece in addition to not having the hang time. So Still a work in progress, but you see the raw talent from a power perspective. You can't teach that kind of power in the legs. So we'll see what happens. And it's good to hear that he's doing well in the holding piece as well. So that's where we're at right now with several of the rookies. I wanted to highlight them. So Khalil Shakir, absolutely crushing it. And again, in tandem with Jameson Crowder continuing to miss practice, Khalil Shakir's stock is only trending up. If things continue as they are, he's going to see a significant role on this Bills offense early in the year. I predicted it would be more towards the back end of the year, towards November, December. I thought we'd start to see him more involved and more, not necessarily a focal point, but getting more rotation and more burn. If Crowder continues to, because that's it. It's not just that Crowder is missing practice, it's that he's missing practice and Shakir is crushing it. Those two things are not good for Crowder, but they are very good for Khalil Shakir. So he's leading this rookie class right now. James Cook is right on his heels, functioning in that kind of defined role, whereas Shakir is crushing it, but we don't necessarily know what his role is going to be given his position grouping in the depth chart there. James Cook, we have an idea. We know what Devin Singletary's skill set is. We know what Zach Moss's skill set is. And I'm not writing off Zach Moss at all yet, but neither of those guys possess the skill set that James Cook has. That speed, that burst, that receiving ability, that route running, that ability to leverage defenders in man and zone, find soft spots, read coverage, all of it on the fly to the level that he does. Again, James Cook in the pass game as a receiver functions in his routes and in leveraging coverage the way a wide receiver does. So just doing that as a running back in general isn't very common, let alone a rookie. James Cook as advertised. And I think he's someone who you see work for him right out of the gate. Keep an eye on him in preseason. We need to see what happens when the pads come on in practice and how he functions in pass protection and in the run against live competition in the preseason. But I think we know what his role is right now. And if anything, it should just expand. He's got a higher floor in terms of what we expect his workload to be earlier in the year than Shakir. But also like Shakir, we could see that exponential growth based on matchup and based on performance, given the known quantities that surround him on that depth chart. Terrel Bernard, his role is a mystery, just given the depth chart. Matt Milano is tremendous, and I know people are very mercurial on opposite ends of the spectrum, also on Tremaine Edmonds, but Edmonds and Milano, no one's really getting near them. No one's really touching them. So we'll see what Bernard does. Does he beat out Dodson for, linebacker 3? Does he get used in some sub-package roles? Do we see him crack the, some starting lineup packages every once in a while as a blitzer? How does he get used? Is he that chess piece? How does he function? Again, I think the ceiling for him is third linebacker, but I think more realistically fourth linebacker, special teams contributor, but he looks good. I'm very impressed with this is something to mention for Terrel Bernard as well. He's one of those guys who, and Leslie Frazier said it as well, but when you watch him on the tape, he's one of those guys that is consistently in the right place at the right time. And some of it can be luck, but to be consistently around the ball that much and to that level and to that degree, at a certain point, it's because you know where to be and you know what to do. Sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. And you're like, oh man, I really lucked into that fumble recovery. Or, oh man, I really lucked up into this deflection or to being in this spot and to turn this throw and getting in this passing window. When it happens to the level of how much is happening for Terrel Bernard, it's because you're putting yourself in that position. He knows where to be and what to do because of his preparation, his study habits, and his high functional football IQ. That is going to go a long way for him. We'll see what it does in his rookie year. But again, he's somebody who has continued to stand out on the field and receive rave reviews off the field for how he prepares and approaches and handles the game. So we'll continue to see what he does. And then Kaiir Elam, again, I think I'm not too worried here because this for me was par for the course. I thought Elam had to clean up a lot from a technical side of things to succeed in the NFL. And I think we're seeing that already. He's being matched up against a technical wizard when it comes to the wide receiver position in Stephon Diggs, and he's losing out consistently so far. Again, he was better today, but I think early on, one of the storylines, if you want to make it one, has been, the struggles of Kaiir Elam, especially when matched up against Stephon Diggs. But I don't think it's anything to worry about too much right now. This is kind of a baptism by fire scenario for Elam and just throw him to the wolves and, chuck him in the pool and see if he can swim. And he's struggling to stay afloat right now, but eventually, I think they expect him to swim. And if anybody can do it, it's him, knowing, again, his preparation and how hard he works and how he approaches the game and how he course corrects and self-corrects. But the good news, again, it's early, and his athleticism and speed in that are as advertised right now. So that's a big plus, again, for this defense, especially in its quest to maintain that rock, paper, scissors ability on defense. So we'll see what happens with Elaim. And then Matt Araiza, again, as advertised, big leg, hang time, and accuracy are a question mark right now. And we'll see what happens for that going forward. Again, all these things have real world and real regular season implications because they all impact their individual and respective side of the ball. And it's not just, oh, okay, this year. A lot of it is going forward in terms of what happens on the back end of 2022. But again, the future, like as all these big contracts start to come up for the Buffalo Bills, you need your draft picks to hit so that way you can have quality players on affordable contracts. That's how you continue to build that pipeline. So we'll see how all these guys function in. I'm going to go back and go to some comments here. Ron saying Cook is super fluid. Yes, he is super fluid. I was very impressed. Pops Mafia saying Cook looks like he glides. I think that's a good way to put it. Oh, question here from Steve. Steve says, in the playoffs, the field condenses. Josh Allen doesn't have the weapons, aka the speed that opens the field like Tampa, Cincy, the Rams, Chargers, Raiders, even Miami. Are you concerned? No. I would like more speed potentially, but I think Gabriel Davis has proven that even though he doesn't have a fast 40 time, he's got game speed. His ability to get vertical against single high and split safety looks is very real. I think the low hanging fruit here is looking at that big 75-yard touchdown against Kansas City in the divisional round. That's a split high safety look, and he ran past his corner and he ran past Juan Thornhill, and Thornhill just peaked a little bit at Dawson Knox on that intermediate route, and that little bit of hesitation was enough for Davis to get vertical. I don't think this is a speedy offense. I think it's a quicker than fast offense, but not enough that I'm concerned at all. I think they have enough speed. I think it's sufficient. I would like it to be more, but I think it's sufficient. But when you add in the sharpness of their concepts and the level of execution, and the athleticism that they have and the power, from a vertical passing attack perspective, from an intermediate passing perspective, combined again with that sharpness and technicality, I'm not too concerned. No, but I think that's fair. I'm thinking this comment is to me. Were you there? Yes, I was present for the early portions of Bill's training camp this week, and it was a really good time. I enjoyed it. Although Sunday was really hot. Like, I wasn't expecting it to be that warm. It was very hot. I was very hot. Taylor says, thoughts on Dorsey in the booth or on the field with Shula or Brady in the booth? I think Dorsey's going to be in the booth. One of the things that was noticed as well during camp so far is when he's calling plays, he's separate from everyone on the sideline, almost as if he's trying to simulate being alone in the booth. I expect him to be up in the booth, and then I would think Joe Brady will be down on the field. Maybe Shula too, but I would think Shula would. I think for sure Dorsey up in the booth, Brady on the sideline. I think Shula probably in the booth as well. Going through more comments. Excellent comment here from Pop saying, I'd like to see if Cook can block in the backfield. I agree. Oh, great comment here from Jason saying Cook is not to be underestimated. And if he has success, the running back position in our offense can force more film study and disguised offense. Exactly. The defenses have to spend more time focusing on the run and honoring that if that run is a threat, which again means anything that is dedicated to the run game means there's less time dedicated to defending Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and this passing attack. So again, the run is important. It's not the primary focus for teams necessarily like it was in the 70s, 80s, 90s, so on and so forth. It is still important. You still need to establish the run in today's NFL. The threat of the run has to be present in today's NFL. There's not a specific ratio, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the foundation or the primary drive of your offense, but you have to have a running game. And ideally, it's not your quarterback because you want him to stay healthy and not get too banged up. Although I am a fan of Josh Allen running the ball on design runs and scrambles, but the Bills need a running game, even though they're a pass first team, even though they're very good with the pass, just like every team in the NFL needs a run game. Spin saying, anyone know when pads come on in camp? Saturday. What else? Oh, yeah, some comments coming through. Yeah, Kaiir was wearing boxing gloves in camp today, which is very, very interesting. And yeah, I think that's all we got here. Oh, comment here coming in from Jessica saying, and I thought I heard or read Cook was working out with Singletary in the offseason. Is that correct? If so, he should be able to block. Yes, he does work out with Devin Singletary in the offseason. I believe Devin Singletary, James Cook, and Dalvin Cook worked out together at the very least last year or this offseason, but I think it's been multiple years in a row. I don't know if that necessarily means though that he should be able to block. I don't think pass protection is a particular strength for Devin Singletary, and I also don't know what they're doing when they work out together. What are they focusing on, and how are they functioning in those works together? I think it speaks more to the rapport than it does the particular skill sets or traits that they may individually have. Tim coming here saying Trey White got burned by Diggs in camp last year. Let's not be too critical of the rookie. Everyone gets burned from time to time. And I hope I didn't come off as too critical. It's week one. We've had 4 days of practice. I think slamming the book or the door shut on anybody, positively or negatively, and making concrete judgments or statements or speaking in absolutes right now isn't correct for anyone. But I think it's different when you have someone who struggled with a certain aspect of their game in college and then is continuing to struggle with it now at this level. I think it's different. Trey White getting burned by Diggs in camp last year is different for me, at least. Trey White is a proven all-pro corner. Dudes get beat from time to time. It's just the nature of the game. Like, I don't think you should go too crazy with it one way or the other, but I think it's different with Trey getting burned by Diggs in camp last year versus Elaim getting beat time and time again by Diggs now. Not saying that means, we're in trouble and Kaiir is going to be bad and this was a horrible first round pick. Things happen. So again, I hope I'm not, I didn't come off as too critical, but I do think it's different. This example right here, Trey getting burned last year in camp by Diggs versus Elaim having it, and the way Elaim has had it this year. I think they're different. Not that means that the book is written for Kaiir, but I think it's a bit different. Pop saying who will be the punt returner? My early money was on Khalil Shakir, but with Crowder being out, again, there's that variable of the Bills don't like their primary returner to be like a functioning part of the offense. So if it's Shakir as the primary returner, they might not want to use him too much in the offense. But again, if he's wide receiver 4, maybe that's not too much for them anyway. I'm not calling it right now. My early money was on Shakir, but with Crowder being out, I think it throws a wrench in the mix. I do think it's I don't think it's going to be McKenzie because I think he's going to be used more in the offense. I think it'll be between Shakir, Marcus Stevenson, and Tavon Austin. I think Stevenson has been inconsistent. So as of right now, I think it's between Shakir and Tavon Austin. That's my thoughts as of right now. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And you know what I think we'll also see is me change the banner right now and say toodles, you guys, because I think we're going to wind down here on this episode. This time went fast. We're already at about an hour and a half, and this episode was fantastic. As always, especially when I'm, I know I like to bring in guests and have, other people ride with me here on the show, but I do a lot of these episodes solo, and it's always nice to have the live viewers when I'm here riding solo. So I feel like I'm not alone, and I have people to talk to and engage with, even though we're not here face to face. But appreciate there. Thank you very much, Pops. I appreciate you. So I appreciate anybody and everybody who rode with me live here on this episode, whether you made a comment, whether you didn't, whatever have you. But I always love seeing the chat go off. I love the engagement between you. Oh, thank you, Jessica. I appreciate you very much. Jessica saying, yeah, we like you solo. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Sincerely, that means a lot. So yeah, thank you to everybody who rode with me live here on this episode, whether questions, thoughts, comments, concerns from me, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns for each other. Like I appreciate the interaction you guys have. I love seeing people when I scroll through the chat. I love seeing someone ask something and then someone in the chat answer them. You guys have back and forth and the conversations that you guys have. It's just, really a great thing to see. And again, from my perspective, thank you so much for, not making me be here by myself and all alone, even though I'm riding solo here on this episode tonight. So thank you to everyone who joined me live here on this episode and rode with me live. If you are still here and we still got a decent amount of heads here right now as I'm, riding this episode out, please drop a like on this video. I know it's corny, but it goes a long way towards helping this show to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. And that's what we're trying to do here on Disguise coverage and on Cover One as a whole. We want to ride this thing until the wheels fall off and continue to grow and get bigger and better to be able to provide you the best coverage that we can for the Buffalo Bills. And honestly, for anything and everything football, to allow you to understand the game that you love and spend time watching, to understand that game better so that you can potentially enjoy it more and be able to understand it at the level that we do, which again, when you understand the chess pieces and the inner workings, it brings that much more enjoyment to the game of football. So any and every ounce of support allows us to continue to grow and potentially do that. So if you guys can drop a like, and girls as well, if you guys can drop a like, thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated. If you are listening on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, again, please drop a rating, please review, please subscribe to Disguise coverage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you are listening on. If you're, again, watching here on YouTube, please subscribe to the Disguise coverage YouTube channel as well. And if you are listening later, watching later, whatever have you, thank you very much for your review, your listen, your download, whether you were watching live or listening or watching later. If you liked this episode, please tell all your family and friends and loved ones about this channel, about this show, and how awesome it is. And if you thought this show or this channel was terrible, that's fine. Tell your enemies and try and ruin their day or week or month or year by recommending something terrible. I appreciate you all more than you possibly know. Thank you very much for riding with me here on this episode. If there was a question that you asked that I wasn't able to get to, I apologize. Get at me on Twitter at pro__ant. I'm going to take off the banner real quick so you can see it. That's what it is right there. pro_ANT. At me on Twitter, DM me, whatever have you. I'm very active on there. That's the best chance to get in contact with me. And again, if I missed your comment or your thought or question, I apologize. Thank you very much to everybody who joined me live here on this episode. If you didn't, appreciate you. You did miss the whole show, Silas. Oh, I appreciate you. Appreciate you watching the replay, bro. Thank you very much, Silas. Yeah, but I was saying, Silas, you're one of the regulars here. I didn't see you in the chat. I was like, I wonder where Silas is, but it's fine. It's fine. And you can always get at me on Twitter as you have in the past as well. Appreciate you. Thank you all very much. I will see you all next week. And as always,